Thank you very much for asking me to come and speak. What I have to say is important and emotional, so I've written it down and I'm going to read it to you. I want to make clear that what I'm about to say are my own views and not of all Extinction Rebellion. I want to tell you about my mum. She was a Methodist preacher from Manchester. For 50 years, she spent all her free time raising monies for NGOs like yours, Oxfam, Christian Aid, Amnesty. She'd have me counting up the money on Sunday afternoons after church. She would tell me proudly each time how much money she'd raised. She was a difficult woman because she felt the pain of injustice and suffering. She said what she thought. She was emotional and abrupt. She had a reputation. Many people, mainly men, thought she was overdoing it, should calm down, be rational and sensible and reasonable. The NGOs in this country were built on the work of thousands of women like this. And it is in memory of my mum, in my mind, that I'm going to talk to you now. I am so fucked off. I am so fucked off. It is several decades since I was asked to speak in front of an audience like this. I was a top student at London School of Economics, but I opted to exit the system after my first year and spent 25 years working 60, 70 hours a week for less than £100 a week. First in this inner city and then growing food in rural West Wales. Manual labouring is no way to build a comfortable, secure career. But I have never had any intention of being involved in a system dedicated to greed and stupidity. A few years ago, it rained every day for 7 weeks. 15 acres of vegetables rotted in the ground. Everyone lost their jobs. I was out of my head with horror and stress. Then we had the coldest winter ever, and I lost all the winter crops. Then the warmest April, then the dullest August. The list goes on. Last year it didn't rain for 12 weeks. It was the hottest summer ever. But it didn't matter because I don't grow veg outside anymore. I can't afford the risk. Last year, food production was down 30% across the Northern Hemisphere. We are facing an El Niño year this year and next, and so more record-breaking temperatures. A sustainability professor with decades of expertise says if this happens, there will be starvation in Europe in 3 years. A conservation biology professor with decades of expertise says the human race will be extinct in a decade. A climatology professor says we don't face a climate emergency, we face a climate catastrophe. Within 3 years, maybe this year, maybe a bit longer, the ice will all be completely melted in the summer in the Arctic. The ice will be gone all year round a decade later. Look at the graph, it's not complicated. The latent heat effect will massively increase global temperatures and weather chaos. Add that to the carbon lag, half a degree of increase already locked in. Add to that global dimming, at least half a degree already locked in. Add that to methane release, to forest fires, to Amazon dieback, acidification of the oceans, the collapse of the insect population. Is it just me, or is the situation beyond fucked? It's physics. There's no position on this, any more than there's a position on whether, if you fall off a cliff, whether or not you fall to your death. Gravity is a fact, not an opinion. And yet the governments are still allowing greenhouse emissions to increase. There are no words to describe such criminality. The Paris Agreement was dead before it was signed. History's greatest act of mass self-delusion. All this means one thing: no food. At 2 degrees centigrade, you can't grow grains at scale in the centre of continents. It means economic collapse. That means mass starvation. Many people won't die from lack of food. They'll die from the secondary effects. The slaughter of global war, mass mental breakdown, mass torture, mass rape. You all know this. It's all connected. It's the end. It's over. I have some sense of what starvation feels like. I've been on 2 14-day hunger strikes in the last 3 years. One to get King's College to divest from fossil fuels, another to get the Labour Party to vote against Heathrow. King's College did the right thing, the Labour Party did not. As you get into the end of the second week, you really don't feel like doing anything after the mid-morning other than lie around. You're not even hungry anymore. It just makes you realise how vulnerable you are. We all are. A few weeks without food, without sustenance from this planet, and our bodies and minds pack up. We die. I was in a meeting the other week with the chief executive of Greenpeace. We talked about the situation. A Greenpeace guy in the room told us that their strategy is, quote, managed defeat. I couldn't find that mentioned on their website. Extinction Rebellion is not doing managed defeat. We are organising mass participation civil disobedience. We're not doing conferences and panels and Q&As. We are getting arrested and going to prison. We are not doing more warm words and resolutions. We are setting up assemblies where ordinary people can decide whether they want their children to be delivered to their deaths by the rich and powerful. We are not just sending out emails and asking for donations. We are going to force the governments to act. And if they don't, we'll bring them down and create a democracy fit for purpose. And yes, some may die in the process. Some of us have passed through the dark night of the soul and are ready. Or at least we are no longer fearful of our fear. So no, I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to sit here or stand here and do my 5-minute slot and hear the moderator saying we've just heard an interesting diversity of views, as the King's College lecturer said when I was on a panel there last week, after I told the students they're soon going to die if they don't rebel. I'm not going to stay for the Q&A because there was no poetry after Auschwitz and there are no words after the facts on the climate and ecological emergency. I guess it is more than likely that you'll carry on anyway. That's the psychology of group pressure. Some of you are upset, I'm sure, but there's no real change without pain. No doubt some will say that what I'm saying is defeatist and dangerous, as Natalie Bennett, ex-leader of the Green Party, did when I walked out of a public meeting on climate change. What I suggested then, as I suggest to you now, instead of continuing with the panel, you split up into small groups and share your emotional response to the prospect of losing everything you love. It seems to me that's the only human thing to do. I suggest you then go home and watch the professors on YouTube till you break down and cry like you don't think you're ever going to stop, and then come back and do what is now obvious. Rebel, both individually and as an organisation. For inspiration, look at the civil resistance struggles in the global south. What does it mean? It means arrest, imprisonment and hunger strikes. Come on the 15th of April, rebellion here in London, and join thousands of people who will stay on the streets for as long as it takes. Get your top people from behind their desks and start to lead for a change. That means, yes, arrest, prison and hunger strikes. If they won't, then go on hunger strike yourself until they do, or get replaced by people who will. You can contact me for how to do it. Because that's what we have to do. And that's what we would do if our parents were lying at home and hadn't eaten for weeks. That's what you do if there were body parts on the way to the tube. If there were women in this room who'd been raped. David Attenborough says we're heading for the collapse of civilization. You've probably heard that. But it's interesting, isn't it? He didn't spell out what that means because that would be impolite. It means what I've just told you. He won't be making a programme on it because that upsets people. I have to tell you, right, I hate upsetting people, but I love my children more. My love for this beautiful world trumps my fear of people's outrage, people who always want to kill the messenger. But I am truly sorry, and I apologise to you all. I want to finish by telling you a bit more about my mum. I held her hand as she was dying, and I remembered what she told me when I left home. She said she used to go into the toilet and cry. She didn't have to tell me why. Our house was always full of leaflets, newsletters, posters from NGOs telling her the terrible things that are happening in this world. Her heart was broken, but she held on to hope because these organisations told her that by raising money, writing letters, sending emails, the NGOs would be able to make it all better. They would fix it. It was a lie then, and it's an infinitely greater lie now. We have all been lying to ourselves. I have. You have. Everyone has. We now have a choice. I've made my choice to rebel, and you have to make a choice too. To continue lying to millions of people, selling hope while planning for managed defeat, or take hold of courage, walk through the fire and come out the other side. To do as the XR slogan says, to tell the truth and to act as if that truth is real. Someone told me recently that there's one thing worse than death, and that is hell, and hell is to live a massive lie. Those of you sitting here today have to decide if you're going to rebel and be the lucky ones, because you will escape the worst, and you may even find some inner peace and joy. The tragedy is what awaits for those of you who continue to sit there and don't face the pain. What awaits you are the horrors for which there are no polite words. Or as they say where I come from, you're going to be completely fucked up. If you're interested in signing up, my friend Doug is there. Thank you so much for listening to me.